Better. There's like wires and things, and like I'm a simple kind of person. Welcome, glad you are here. Welcome to James for the summer here. We're going to be doing something that's kind of a little different from what we typically do, but I don't really think it's going to feel probably all that different. But we're going to be in a little bit more than normal way, sort of walking just through a book of the Bible, not super strict word for word, verse by verse, but sort of taking the natural chunks and topics that it covers and just go through those sort of in a little bit of a more linear fashion. And so if you're good with context clues, you've probably guessed correctly, there's no trick in it, that we're going to be looking through James. I thought it was a good choice for a number of reasons, one of which is it's a reasonably appropriate length, so we can more or less get through the whole thing and then move on to something else without either going a year and a half or just stopping in the middle. Also, it's very helpful, I think, that it's written really to a nobody in particular, but just sort of the general group of early followers of Jesus. There's obviously always some differences in time and place between there and then, and context and culture and things of those natures, but it's not something like Paul writing specifically to Timothy where there's a unique relationship and circumstance. So this is just a little bit more general, and so it applies a little more easily to all of us, and here even in this time and place. And how fascinating is it that it was written by James, the half-brother of Jesus? It's a little confusing because there's more than one James in the New Testament, but this wasn't written by James, the disciple of Jesus. This was James, the one who met Jesus not when he was 30 and starting his public ministry, but this James met Jesus the day he was born. And he saw him and lived with him and watched him and grew up with him and did not believe that he was the unique Son of God or that he was the prophesied Messiah or the one who would provide atonement for the sins before God. But after his death and resurrection, he came around pretty quickly and ended up becoming one of the very influential leaders of the early church. And so that's an embarrassingly inadequate introduction to the book, but it will have to do for today. So how does growth happen? I feel like I mention this once every year or so because it can apply to a lot of things and is hilarious, but there was a time in high school where I threw myself into lifting weights and putting on as much muscle as is possible. Obviously a fool's errand for somebody with this sort of build, but I really threw myself into it, and I made some progress. Like if you try to swim from San Diego to Hawaii with the little pool floaties on your arms like your 8-year-old has, like you can make some progress. And so I did, and really what I wanted was just for girls to like me, and I didn't realize that the problem was less that I was skinny and more my world-class level of awkwardness. But whatever progress I did or didn't make, I did learn a lot. And here's how growth happens, is by putting an appropriate amount of stress on the muscles. That's why there are weights. That's the function of the weight, is to put the appropriate stress on the muscles. And so then when you do that, and then you're excited because you can lift heavier and heavier, really what that is that's both evidence of the growth that's happened and also enables you to have more growth in the future. Eventually, I did manage to get married to an attractive female, and later in life took up running instead, which I was much better suited for. And really the same principles applied. The harder I ran, the harder I was able to run. The longer, the further I ran, the longer and the further I was able to run. The more difficult I made it for myself in terms of pace or distance, the more I grew and my strength and endurance grew. And none of you are surprised by this, unless maybe you just think it's funny that I lifted weights. But you all know how these principles work. This isn't surprising to anybody. You all know if you hear a world-class musician, you've never thought, but that person is so gifted. They just woke up one day, picked up their instrument, and they were world-class. Of course you know that is the product of putting themselves through thousands of hours of working and practicing and pushing themselves so that they would be able to do something today that they were not able to do yesterday. So I hope everybody is pro-growth. None of us are finished products. We won't be for as long as we're in this life, and so it's really easy to say, but it is also true. And so I hope we're all pro-growth, but how does it happen? What's your plan? You have a plan for growth? Because when I lifted, I had a lifting schedule. When I ran, I had a training program. Musicians have specific times when they've set aside to practice because they know that without those things, it's just not going to happen. You're going to end up defaulting to the path of least resistance or just doing whatever sounds good in the moment, which is most likely to be watching TV or YouTube or something else that does not produce anything that's likely to be confused for growth. So according to James, here's how growth happens is he says, dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. And I love how James in the Bible deal in reality. After a brief introduction, literally the first word is when troubles come. Not like maybe or if you would be unfortunate. It's when troubles come. Life is gonna have some bumps. And when you say bumps, here's what that means, is really, really difficult, painful things. We all know that the world isn't perfect. We all say things like, well, life is hard, and we preach things like life is hard, but you don't really know what that is until it happens, and then you're in it. And nobody would say that you expect life to be perfect or everything to be right in the world, but then what happens when you have to get stuck for 4 minutes in traffic? Or like they put onions on your burger when you specifically said, please don't put onions on my burger. That's not what this is talking about. This is troubles. Life has really difficult things. I don't know how I would really quantify this, but I'm going to take a guess and say that probably my life has been in the most fortunate 0.1% of people in the history of humanity. Just based on that, I've lived to 48 years old. I've never had to go to war or kill or attempt to kill another person. I've never missed a meal because there was not food available. And to date, I have still not yet had to bury a parent, child, spouse, or sibling. I know that's not unique for everybody in this room, and most of us at least will be able to tick off several of those boxes. But I've had a really good life. A lot of people would trade their problems for my problems very, very quickly. But even in the best situation, life has bumps. I was bullied in school growing up and didn't have many friends in a small town. That was really, really hard. I had colon cancer and chemotherapy that basically took a year of my life, and I'm now just almost ready to be discharged by my oncologist. That's really difficult. I deal with various levels of depression. In an effort to serve God and people with my life, the first church that I pastored, I effectively had to close after 6 years. Here's what that feels like from this place, is that feels like a lifelong failure to God and the people in the church and the people in the community who were not a part of the church and your family. Life has really difficult things. Over years of pastoring, I've had people tell me a lot of things. At first, some of them sounded pretty crazy. After a while, nothing really sounded crazy anymore. You hear statistics and read numbers, and then when those start to become people who you know and people in your life, then nothing starts to sound really difficult or crazy after all. It's like, I don't know all of you. I know some of you in different levels. Some of you I know very well. Some of you I know maybe only your name. But whether I know what they are or not, I know you have troubles. Life is difficult. And so this is really the first step to being able to deal with this in a healthy way that leads us to growth, is to understand and expect that there will be troubles. And this is so helpful. This is so tremendously helpful in a couple of different ways. For one, this means that when something happens, you don't have to wonder, like, did I do something specifically wrong? Or is God specifically punishing me for something? Of course, there are things that you can do that will have natural consequences. If you stop going to work, you're going to lose your job. That's just how that works. If you keep driving your car and you don't put gas in it, it's going to stop. That's just how that works. But the fact that something happened that was was bad or difficult or troubling, that doesn't mean that you're going to have to now, or it hopefully doesn't mean, if we understand this, then this won't mean that you have to then work through your view of God, or I thought God really loved me. Why would he let something like this happen to me? I don't know. Is my relationship with Jesus even real? Let me tell you that when I received the cancer diagnosis, that is always a bombshell. That's always something that you're going to have to deal with. Here's what I did not have to deal with. I didn't have to work through, even to get to that point, I didn't have to work through, okay, but how could this happen? Is God really real? This did not in any way contradict my view of God or my understanding of the world. It really, if anything, verified it. Honestly, a thought that I had very consciously a couple times, it was never why me, but a couple times I did think, yeah, I probably was a little overdue. I've been pretty healthy for a long time now. I mean, something was going to happen. And so if you expect this world to be heaven and it is not heaven, you're going to be confused, you're going to be disappointed, and things aren't going to make sense. Understand and expect that there will be troubles. That's just a part of what this life has. And by very definition, troubles are unwelcome. You don't want them. They're difficult. They're painful. You don't want to go through them. Of course you don't. And so most of us, when troubles come our way, we find that to be an opportunity to try to get out of trouble. But this said, when troubles come your way, that's an opportunity for great joy. And the word opportunity is interesting because an opportunity is not automatically actualized. In order to take advantage of an opportunity, you're going to have to interact with that in a particular way. You may be able to look back and say, you know what, I am so glad that I took advantage of that opportunity, that now I get to enjoy these tremendous benefits. I'm in such a better place because of that. Or you can look back and you say, boy, I really had an opportunity and I let it slip away. I could be in such a better place now than I was then, but I let the opportunity go, and now I really regret that. And so troubles can be an opportunity, it says, for great joy, which really sounds good. Okay, what does he mean? He says, for you know that when your faith is tested, which seems like he's really using as a synonym for troubles coming your way, well, then your endurance has a chance, it's an opportunity, right, to grow. I'll assume that you're all interested in growth, right? We're all pro-growth. I hope nobody here wants to be the exact same person and in the exact same place that you are today in a year or 10 years. So here's the question again, what's your plan? Do you have a plan for growth? Here's what I would love for your plan to be. These are some of the best answers that I could imagine that would come from you, and that's not even a trick. This is very honest. Here what I think would be great answers if I asked you, and I'm not gonna, so don't worry, but if you did, these would be the answers. You say, Ross, I've decided I've really committed to being at church. I've changed some things in my work schedule, and probably not 52 times, but I'm even going to keep track. In the next year, I'm going to be at church somewhere like 48 to 50 times, even when the preaching isn't that good. I know that it's the catalyst for so many healthy and helpful things. I would say, great. That's a great plan. You're really going to see benefits from that. That's good. Maybe you said, I'm going to make, in a way that I never have, I'm going to make time with Scripture and prayer a priority. I downloaded this app. I can't even open Instagram until I've been in my Bible app for 20 minutes now. I don't know if that app exists, but if it does, I would say that's a really good plan, and you're taking some steps to make that plan into reality. That's really, really good. Say, Ross, here's what we're going to do is we're going to redo, or maybe for the first time, we're going to do a budget, except we're going to put giving at the very top, because I know that can be so transformative, and it's our time to be able to experience that. That's a real plan. That's really good. Say, Ross, I'm going to start serving. Maybe a ministry in the church, maybe something that isn't even a part of the church, but I've been so much about myself, and every week I've spent 2 hours watching pro wrestling. I'm going to cut that out, and I'm going to turn that into something that's going to make things better for another person and start serving. That's fantastic. You say, I'm going to commit to a small group, and I told the leader, the facilitator, that I'm going to be there, and so now if I don't show up, the days that I really don't feel like being there, they're going to ask me, hey, what happened? Where were you? And because I'm a little bit emotionally unhealthy, I would rather deal with just going than dealing with that question. So I'm just going to lean into that, and because I know I'll be so happy that I went afterwards, and that'd be a really good plan. Now, in fairness, none of those are exactly easy. They all require some intentionality and some effort, but they're not really troubles either, are they? I mean, those aren't troubles. So here's the good and the bad. The good is that these are exactly some of the things that God uses in 1,000 different ways. You can walk out of here in a few minutes armed with the knowledge that God can use the troubles that come your way as opportunities for great joy and for growth. Guess when you're going to need that knowledge? When there's troubles. You don't need to know that troubles can be an opportunity for great growth if there aren't going to be any troubles. You don't need to know to cling to God like He's the only thing that matters in the middle of a struggle if there's no struggle. So here's the situation. Troubles are going to come your way. Here's the question is, what are you going to do with them? How are you going to look at this? And you have at least two options, maybe more, but here's what we tend to do is look at troubles as something that we just have to get through. Here's the much better option is to see troubles with a long-range lens and an eye to how will I come out of this on the other side in a better, stronger, healthier place. I've been through my share of school at least. In fact, a couple of years ago, there was a time when I stepped out of ministry for a period, and I wasn't even sure at first if I ever was going to want to be back in ministry. And so I'm in my early 40s trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And my wife, who should always be listened to, here's what she said, she said, Ross, I think you should go back to school, get a doctorate, and teach in a Bible college or a seminary. You would love that. And she's completely right. I would love that. If you were here for the last 3 weeks, the series on the Bible, you probably saw that, how fun that was for me. That absolutely would love it. There's a couple reasons why I didn't do it. Here's one of them, is I don't want to go back to school. I don't like school. I never have. I've always viewed school as just something that I had to get through. And there's something to be said for trusting the process and the people who developed the process, that if you jump through the hoops that they put in front of you, then hopefully, in theory, in the process there, you will learn and retain some things that'll be good and helpful. But that was never my goal. My goal was just to get through. If anybody else here went to college right out of high school like I did, you probably had a similar interaction with what were called non-trads, non-traditional students. These were adults who had a few years of real life experience and then went back to college. And here was how we felt about non-trads, is we hated them. Not as people, they were fine as people, but in class, they asked questions. We want to go flirt with that cute person or play video games or go to Taco Bell or whatever other probably very, very poor life choices we had available. And they were interested in trying to learn. Don't you know what college is for? And so if you were a non-trad, listen, I trust that you are not offended by this because you understand and you knew that we were stupid, and now we understand a little better. But here's the immature response to troubles is, what do I have to do to make it through this? What has to happen so that I can get the piece of paper that said I did it and I can just move on? Here's the adult response to troubles, is how can I come out of this on the other side stronger, better, in a healthier place, and a better version of me? We all saw school as just what you had to get through. The non-trad saw it as something that could have value and actually benefit them. Part of my problem was that after a year of college, I decided that I was going to go to seminary and go into ministry. I felt like that was what God had for me. And so that meant I had to have a degree. It didn't even matter what it was, so I just, psychology. It's kind of interesting. Maybe it'll help me understand people or something. But I didn't really need to learn anything, like to be effective in my field. I really was just getting the degree to take the next step. And so I remember how clearly this struck me when I was in a class my senior year. This is senior in college. And the professor asked us a question, nobody answered immediately, and he got kind of irritated. And he's like, you guys, you know this. You all had abnormal psych already. And it struck me so clearly for the first time that he was actually expecting that I learned and retained information from the class last semester or last year. Never really even crossed my mind that I should be concerned with that. So guess how I look back now on my college experience? What a colossal, wasted opportunity. I did get the degree. I did go to seminary. Occasionally, I remember something that I guess is a little bit helpful, but I could have gained so much more or chosen a more helpful degree or something other than just to get through, because I had a plan to get through. I read the books. I wrote the papers. I came up with the right answers for the tests. That was okay. But I didn't have a plan to grow. So it's one thing to have that happen in school, but don't let that happen in life. And so this is how James finishes this little section. He says, so let it grow. Oh, let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Instead of asking, what's the quickest way out of this? What's the easiest way through? Is there some way I can dodge this completely? No. You ask yourself, how can this be used for my growth? And you make growth your goal rather than just alleviation or getting through. Probably some of you, probably a couple of you, have heard of a race, an event called the Barkley Marathons. It's confusing because it's plural, but it's just one race. But I and many people learned of this through a Netflix documentary a few years ago, and now there's a lot of them because it's one of the most bizarre and fascinating events on the planet, and really maybe legitimately the most demanding. It's a race that takes place in a mountainous state park in eastern Tennessee. And the distance, you don't know exactly what it is. It's not measured professionally like a normal marathon. And it changes every year, but it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 miles, unmarked, through woods and mountains and briar patches. And to be a finisher, you in fact have to complete this 26 miles 5 laps. And just for fun, to complete the first 4 laps, if you're able to do so, which most people are not, most competitors are not, you alternate the direction in such a way so that of the first 4 laps, you never do the same direction twice in the daylight. It's just insidious. And that's not even really the most difficult physical part. The elevation gain and loss over the course of this is in the neighborhood of 54,000 feet. That's equivalent to climbing Mount Everest, not from base camp, from sea level, twice. Up and down and up and down. I was at one time a very fit, active New Hampshire hiker. A big day, a set your alarm for 3 a.m. day was somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 6,000 feet. This is 10 times that. The Empire State Building is 1,200 feet. This is going up and down the Empire State Building 45 times, but not on stairs. You're going through briar patches and on rocky footing. In fact, a part of the event, a part of the goal of the event is to determine what is the capacity for human endurance. How much can a human being really, in fact, do? And the only way to find that, the race director will tell you, is to set the distance at just a little bit past what a human being can do. And so most years, there are no finishers. From 2017 to 2022, there were no finishers. In 2023, there were 3 finishers. This year, there was a record. There were 5 finishers, including, for the first time ever, a woman. And so guess what? Next year, I got to make it harder. I guess a human being can do this, so let's bump it up a little bit. And I have a very strong negative desire to be a part of an event like this. I don't want to do it. But you know what would be awesome? To be able to do it. if you had the strength and the experience and the endurance that only comes from a decade plus of continually having things be more and more difficult and more strenuous. And every one of us have, on some level or another, experienced the satisfaction of being able to do today what you could not do yesterday. And the way you got there was by putting more and more intentionally and more increasingly difficult challenges in your way. Now, I do not expect anybody to try and make life more difficult than it already is. I don't expect you to consistently and intentionally put difficulties and troubles in your way in life. Life will do that for you. Life will be difficult enough. But when that happens, your plan for growth can't be to find the path of least resistance. You won't grow at all. You will be no stronger tomorrow than you are today. You're not a finished product, but God has given you this life to grow into more of who He created you to be. So understand and expect there are going to be troubles. Right? See troubles with a long-range lens, with an eye to how can I come out of this stronger and better than I am today, and make your goal growth rather than alleviation. Take the training program seriously. Don't value comfort over growth. And when troubles come your way, they can be an opportunity, if you take them, for great joy and the growth that will come out of them. Okay, let's pray. Father, thank you so much that you've given us sometimes not the life that we want, but the life that we need and the life that will benefit us as we become more and more who you have created us to be. Thank you that you make so clear that trouble or difficulty doesn't mean something wrong or that you don't care for us, but in fact, it's the exact opposite. That the reason we have this life is because you do care for us. And that in fact, the obstacle that you've put in our way that we are completely unable to conquer, you have done for us. If you've never taken, still praying here, if you've never taken the opportunity to connect with God through Jesus Christ, there are elements of life that we will never be able to really overcome and accomplish. Every one of us has sin. There have been things that were wrong. We did them anyway. And for God to be a just judge, He can't just pretend that that doesn't happen. But what can we possibly do to repay the God who created us in the first place for where we betray Him? Well, we can't, but that's why Jesus came, lived a sinless life. And His death on the cross was in our place, in your place. That was Him satisfying God's justice on your behalf for the sins that you committed and that I committed. And He takes our sinfulness, we take His righteousness, and we are forgiven and adopted into God's family as His children. If this is you right here today, you can have this be you. You can make this June 30th, 2024 at Life Point Crossing the day it happens for you. You just talk to God. You can pray out loud or in your heart. Just talk to Him and He'll hear you say, God, I believe that Jesus Christ came and died and resurrected so that I could be forgiven and be adopted as a child in your family. Please come into my life. Forgive me and adopt me. Begin to make me into more of the person you have created me to be. And give me the life that you have for me. If you just prayed a prayer like that for the first time, the prayer doesn't do anything exactly, but God's grace comes to you through the faith that you place in Him, and you are a new spiritual creation, forgiven and adopted as a child in God's family. If you would do the best thing that you can do from there is to let somebody know you're not supposed to live this life by yourself. You can go out to the point, that's just the corner in the lobby when we're done here, let the person there know the decision that you've made. They'll take your information, we'll be able to follow up with you with some good, healthy next steps. For those of us, or if you're watching online, send us a message, it'll be the same. Those of us who have been followers of Jesus, but it is so easy to try to make the troubles in life just something to get through instead of something to allow God to use to grow us into who He's created us to be. Will we make the commitment right here between yourself and God that your goal isn't going to be alleviation, your goal is going to be growth, that you will take the opportunities that God puts in your place. Don't go through something difficult and not take the growth that could be yours and take the benefit. And the reason probably that God has placed that in your life, but that you will step into what he has for you. The good times and the bad, there's plenty of good times. This isn't a message that says everything in life is bad. That's not at all the case. But this is a message that says even the bad can be used for good if you will cooperate with God and make that into what he's created it to be. Father, we're so grateful that you have, in fact, made the world in such a way so that even the